if I am going to solve this rational equation, you should notice this is a proportion, a fraction equal to a fraction. There's a nice shortcut when you have a fraction equal to a fraction called a proportion. And what you do to solve this is you just do something called cross multiply. So you multiply those two, which would be negative 8 times 2x. And you set that equal to the other diagonal multiplication, which is 3 times x plus 6. So again, I multiply these two, set them equal, and now I have to solve. In order to solve, the left side becomes negative 16x. The right side you need to distribute. And then in order to solve for x, I got to get x to one side. So since there's an 18 over here, let me move this over. So I'm going to minus the 3x over, leaving me negative 19x equals 18. Now I'm going to get x by itself. So do I divide by the negative 19 or the 18? Which one do I divide off? Well, it should be the negative 19 is going to divide off, leaving me x equals negative 18 over 19. That is your answer. Now, you have to watch out for extraneous here. So I got to look for my restrictions. Look at the denominators. What would create zeros in the denominators? You have to make sure about restrictions. So for restrictions, well, x plus 6 cannot equal 0, nor 2x can equal 0. So what would make these equal to 0? Well, it would be negative 6 and 0. Negative 6 would make this 0, and 0 would make that 0. Is that either of those? No. So my answer is okay. But we have to watch out for extraneous, because we can't have answers that create zeros in the denominator. So to solve this one, we could make it a proportion by putting a 1 on the bottom. I could put a 1 on the bottom here and cross multiply solve, but I'm going to do it a different way that's more useful for other problems like this. In order to solve this, I can get rid of this 6x on the bottom by multiplying both sides by 6x. If I multiply both sides by 6x, watch what happens. That disappears, leaving you 30x equals negative 7. That becomes 30x, and negative 7 is left. Can you quickly solve that now?
Yeah.
Yeah. You divide by 30. So x equals negative 7/30. Now, is this extraneous? Well, if I plug this in the denominator, would it create a 0? No, my restriction is 0, so I don't have to worry about it. My restriction is when x equals 0, so this answer is not 0, so we're good. Make sure you check your answers. All right, if I want to solve this one, I could put a 1 underneath the 4 and make a proportion, or I could simply multiply both sides by the denominator, which is 2x minus 5. If I multiply both sides by 2x minus 5, watch what happens. That would disappear, leaving you 2. And over here, you could distribute the 4, giving you 8x minus 20. Now, can I simply solve that? Again, you could have done a proportion, put a 1 underneath here, cross multiply, or you could simply multiply both sides by the denominator. So to solve this, I'm going to get rid of the 20. So I'm going to add the 20 over. So then I get 22 over here equals 8x. Get rid of the 8 by dividing it off. And I get x equals, well, 22 over 8 can reduce because they both have a 2 in common. So that's 11/4. So does 11/4 create a 0 in the denominator? My restriction is actually 5 over 2. This, when you plug into here, will not create a 0, so we're okay. So to solve this one, I cannot do a proportion on this one. So what I want to do is multiply by the denominators. The problem is, do you want to multiply everything by w and then multiply everything next by 5? Why multiply it by separate w and then a 5? Why not multiply it by both at once? So can I multiply it by 5w? Instead of w and then 5, do it all at once. That's called your LCD. Have you ever heard of an LCD? It's a lowest common denominator. So 5w is my LCD. I'm going to multiply everything by that instead of doing it one by every denominator. So I'm going to multiply the top one by 5w, each piece, which is both sides. Once I multiply everything by 5w, so once I multiply everything by 5w, watch what happens. The w's disappear, the 5 disappears, and you're left with the 5 times 3 minus the 8 times w, and then over here you get a negative 20w. So this becomes 5 times 3, this becomes minus 8w and negative 20w, and we can solve this. Again, I could have multiplied, instead of doing 5w, I could have multiplied everything times w, and then everything times 5, but that's a waste. Just do it all at once. So I have 5 times 3 is 15, minus 8w equals negative 20w, and I want to solve this. So I'm going to add the 8w over. And I now have 15 equals negative 12w. Then I divide by a negative 12 to get rid of that. So w equals 15 over negative 12 reduces because 3 goes into both. So that would be 5 fourths, because 3 goes into both, and it would be negative 5 fourths. Now, is that extraneous? Well, does this create a 0 in the denominator? No. My restriction would have been 0. That is not 0. That does not cause an error. So we are done with that problem.